Okay, so in my last video, I asked this question and well, I got no replies. So I decided to make a follow-up video. Now, before we get started, let me make one thing clear. This video is not just about what you might have missed in the teaser. Oh no, I'm also going to drop some mind-blowing theories and thoughts about what could go down in the Fontaine storyline. Like, we are talking everything from the Fontaine region to the grand scheme of things in Teyvat. So grab your popcorn, sit tight and watch this video from start to finish. You don't want to miss a single detail, trust me. Let's start with the basic things first. All of the character names. First, we got Lyney, Lynette, and of course the main antagonist, Arlecchino or the Knave. Next, we got the Hydro Archon herself, Furina or Fossilor. Then we got Dark Sampo, Hook's long-lost cousin, Albedo's long-lost relative, Texas Sarah with long hair, Taylor Swift, and this hot, sexy man who sounds like Zhongli, which makes sense because both of them are like the alpha males. Okay, so I gave them nicknames because I don't want to butcher the pronunciation of their actual names, so I'll be using those for the rest of the video. Now let's get into it. Let's talk about the three siblings, Lyney, Lynette, and Albedo's long-lost relative. The burning question on everyone's minds, why does Lynette have cat ears while Lyney and the long-lost relative don't? Are they step-siblings? Adopted perhaps? Who knows? I dug through every nook and cranny of the internet for lore, but guess what? No luck. But then, out of the blue, a notification popped up on my phone. Now, I wanted to focus on this part of the post, whether people are trying to attract her attention or simply curious. She shuts them out with bizarre responses like entering standby mode and I need to space out. So yeah, she's a fucking robot. Even the drip art description labels her as magic function magic assistant. And not to mention, in the teaser, it looks like Lyney is the magician while Lynette is being controlled like a puppet, at least to me. But wait, there is more. If Lynette wasn't enough to satisfy your fetishes of fucking a robot, we also have Albedo's long-lost relative, who is also a robot. Look at the description of his drip art. It says automaton. And last time I checked, automaton means a fucking robot. Now the only one who I can't confirm as a robot with certainty is Lyney. But hey, that doesn't mean he's not a cat. Most definitely not. His drip art description says Felis fuscus. And a quick search tells me that Felis is a genus of small and medium-sized cat species, while Fuscus is black or brown. So this bro is a cat, but probably not a robot. Now let's talk about the main antagonist, Arlecchino. And well, during her part of the teaser, we see exactly 8 shadows, which might indicate other Fatui harbingers. However, what if I told you that Arlecchino wants to betray the Cryo Archon and the Fatui? I know that I'm literally talking out of my ass here, and I have no proof for this besides this.
Look, I've got nothing against people who have their own agendas. I myself joined the Fatui to get more experience in combat. But I don't like her at all. If she stood to benefit from betraying others, she'd turn against the Tsaritsa in a heartbeat. There isn't a sane bone in her body.
A wolf in sheep's clothing. To exert a higher level of control over people, she puts on a graceful and cordial front. Most of those who have seen her true crazy self have gone poof.
So basically, she deceives people, and well, what would be better than deceiving someone who you are quote-unquote working for? Next, let's talk about this hot, sexy man. And well, I want you to take a closer look here. Write a comment if you see something. And if you didn't see anything until now, then try looking now. Do you see it? It looks like he is from Kandria. And this makes me think that we will be getting some juicy Kandria lore from him. Maybe even find out the truth about Celestia and Kandria, since Celestia is literally situated right above Fontaine. And we all know about Celestia's on Kandria. Now let's talk about the Archon. And let me give you some basic terminology first. Lockfolk, or as we know them, oceanids, are a species made of pure hydro energy, similar to slimes. So far, they appear to be all females and are able to control water and mimic real life forms like those birds, which I hate because I never have a fucking bow user in the team. Anyway, getting sidetracked here. So after the fall of the previous Archon, also known as Lord of Amrit, during the Cataclysm, Greater Lord Rukkhadevata anchored her to a mortal realm in the form of Amrit Pool. Also, you didn't hear this from me, but Rukkhadevata should be pronounced as Rukhdevta or Rukdev for short, since these terms are derived from Sanskrit and the English pronunciation completely butchered it. So basically, what this implies is that fossil lore, the Archon we saw is not the original Archon, but instead a successor. And from the 1.4 Oceanid event, we know that Rodea is a Logfolk who came from Fontaine to Mondstadt, and as a Logfolk, she had sworn allegiance to the previous Hydro Archon. However, the Logfolk at large currently do not agree with the plans and ideals of the current Hydro Archon, so she refuses to acknowledge or support her and has fled from there. Also, speaking of the current Archon, I've got a theory for you. In the Vibro Crystal verification event, we discovered that Fontaine's law system is complicated as heck. Laws change randomly, leaving people confused about what's legal or not. Plus, there's a ton of complicated paperwork involved, and messing it up can land you in court. Now let's look at the sexy guy's description of Furina. He calls her as being prone to hysterics, which means she is super emotional and likes to exaggerate shit. Based on these things, I can only assume that the Fontaine law system might be this volatile because of Furina, as she doesn't involve herself with the court's decision but probably still has the power to change it to whatever she likes. Now let's move on to another theory, and this is more of a general theory, but from the toy making event in Inazuma, we know that Fontaine has an energy system which is very special, and no one knows how long it can be sustained. Thus, people are searching for alternative energy solutions before it all comes crashing down. I feel like this energy system is being powered by the Hydro Archon Gnosis, like how Geonosis is used for Mora minting while Dendronosis is used for the internet. Now ask yourselves the question, why is the energy system depleting and can't be sustained? I feel like it's because of the previous Archon's death. The previous Archon, who we know as Lord of Amrit, or as my friend told me that her remains are called Amrit, I don't know. But the main point here is the word Amrit and its association with the previous Archon. The word Amrit is a Sanskrit word which means immortal. So I can only hope that a gnosis belonging to anything related to Amrit would have infinite power to fuel something. But since the original Archon is dead, the energy system is getting more fucked by the day. Now, get ready for the Grandaddy Theory of how everything is happening in Fontaine. Picture the earlier trailer, particularly the flow of it. It's all about magic, deception, acting, and controlling every aspect of the show. This makes me believe that there will be masterminds fighting for control over everything. And these masterminds are probably the Fatui and someone from Fontaine, who will be trying to manipulate events to their advantage. Who is that someone from Fontaine, you ask? I think it's the narrator Egeria, considering she is commenting over the entire trailer, which means she knows exactly what is happening and can plan moves accordingly. I especially like this part of, being actors and how every part of the show is being controlled by choosing the right place, time, and people, because all of this ties into my theory of how the entire Genshin Impact world works and what exactly is happening with the Traveler and their sibling. But hey, that's a theory for another time. And if you do want me to make a video on that, then make sure to comment down below. So those were my thoughts and theories on the Fontaine teaser. It got me hyped and I can't wait to see how it all unfolds in the game. Finally, I just have to say that there is a giveaway going on my channel for 5 Vulcans or Express Passes. And in my last pull video, I got cugged very hard on my friend's account while pulling, even after spending. And since I did spend in that video, I decided to do a giveaway for that same amount. So 5 Vulcans or Express Passes. And all you need to do to enter is like, comment, subscribe with that bell notification turned on. And I will see you all next time.